Hi, everyone. It's our pleasure to have Andrew Holland. He's the CEO and the founder of Fusion Industry Associates. Uh, and we just learned, I was going to read his bio, but I just learned that his great parents came to US in 1640. So I can start from there, maybe, get started. But he has been in, well, he did his undergrad in Wake Forest, and he went to St. Andrews for a master's. You work with Senator, what's his name, Chuck Hagel of Nebraska for a while, and he's been since then involved in a lot of things, but mainly on the energy sector. So he's been engaged in the energy sector for a long time, and he took the initiative to form this Fusion Industry Associates, which is very insightful. And back in the day when you started, I think people would have said, "What are you doing here?" But he has done an amazing job putting together the U.S. and international companies together and interacting with the national labs and the universities. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you. Come over.
Thank you all for being here. Thanks for spending the time with me today to come inside from the beautiful weather outside. It's been a real pleasure to spend the last 24 hours here in Princeton. I had the opportunity to go over to Princeton Plasma Physics Lab yesterday afternoon and see all the work that's been done there for decades, 75 years. Over there to talk and see the leaders there. So thanks to Laura Burzak for hosting me, and to Steve Cowley for being there as well. It's great. It's great to be here at the Andlinger Center, and I'm excited to run through some of this with you today. I'm going to talk about the state of the fusion industry, where it's come from, and hopefully get into some questions about where it's going. We can identify some trends, but we're also going to have a little humility to talk about we don't know the answers and we don't know where it's going to go. We are certainly riding a wave right now and certainly looking at an exciting future, but there's also some great deal of uncertainty, as you'd expect in any emerging industry. So I'm going to start, though, with the FIA. I founded the FIA in May of 2021. We're going to hit our 5-year birthday. May 8th, I think, was the official date that we get recognized as an independent association. So what do? We act as the unified voice of the association. We're a membership organization, so that means that all of our members do pay dues. They join us. We're a business association, which means that it's companies working together on non-commercial things. We're actually organized under 501c6 of the tax code, for those of you IRS background. But what that means is it's like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or your local chambers of commerce, national associations of manufacturing, stuff like that. It allows companies to work together for the betterment of the whole industry. And so we can't do things that would benefit one specific company, but we can come together, all the companies, talk about what are the things that we want to work together on and how to push these forward. We were founded in 2021 to really be Washington focused, to be the organization that spoke for the industry towards Congress, towards the Department of Energy, towards the White House, and towards regulators. And over time, that expanded because we got a huge amount of incoming demand from the public, from the press, from various other stakeholders. And then it expanded internationally as well because we got so many questions coming in from international partners, international other nations, that it became clear that we were either going to have to expand our mandate to be international, or we were going to have to help seed some other groups or something like that. And so in the end, we are the International Association of the Private Fusion Industry. You'll see our membership in a future slide 44 members right now. These are the companies, the developers that are doing the research and development towards fusion energy, and over 115 affiliate members. Every year we do a state of the industry report. And so this one is the global fusion industry in 2025. This came out in July of last year. So some of these numbers are going to be a little bit dated. I've updated where I can and where we know, but we are going to do this report again for 2026. We'll start the survey in May. You should think of this as more of a snapshot in time as opposed to, you know, a comprehensive assessment of where things are. And I'll be able to give you better numbers in July. But I think these are pretty consistent. I can verify at least 55 private fusion companies around the world. I mentioned 44 members. The ones that are not members are either Chinese companies or small companies that probably will join at some point. We do not have membership opportunities for Chinese companies because under our bylaws, you have to be independent from government control. You can't say that in China for any company. There's been over $10.5 billion invested into fusion, and of that, 3.4 billion has been raised. This is the last year. So say since early 2020, since early 2025, middle 2025. So going back 18 months probably now, $3.4 billion has been raised. So that's an upward trending curve. It's still the 12 months that saw the most investment into fusion still goes back to 2021, though, when there was a significant amount that went into just 3 or 4 companies. Commonwealth Fusion raised $1.8 billion that year, as did Helion raised over $500 million. General Fusion raised $300 million. So very significant numbers then. We still haven't seen that big bump, and I'm happy to talk about how it's distributed, but we've seen more of a distribution across more different companies than kind of that consolidated amount in 2021. In the last report, we saw an 84% increase in government funding to private companies. These are public-private partnerships, direct investment by the government into these companies. Most of that is not into American companies. Most of the American companies, even though some have partnerships with the government, some have public-private partnerships through the Milestone program at DOE or something, that's still a relatively small percentage of their total invested. That 84% increase was primarily from companies in Germany and Japan. We can estimate there's 5,000 jobs in the industry and at least 10,000 in the fusion energy supply chain. And then the final thing I'll show you is that we are not there yet. $10.5 billion sounds like a lot, but billions and billions of dollars more are needed. Fusion isn't cheap. Fusion is hard. Remember that. So because we've been doing this for 5 years, you can see some trends over time. Like I said, the largest total number went from 2021 to 2022. That was the biggest jump, but you can also see kind of successive jumps over time. My bet for 26 is we'll probably get over 11, maybe over 12 billion, depending on what gets announced. It's been interesting now that companies will accelerate their announcement to make sure they get it into the report. This has kind of become the global standard to say where things are. And you can see that the total number of companies we identify has grown over time as well. What's important to note is that it's not always the same companies. There is a good bit of churn within here as well, as you'd expect in a emerging and growing industry. Especially among the small companies, there has been a number of companies that just went away. Whether they go bankrupt, they change into something else, or various other things. There is a good amount of churn within that kind of doesn't get shown up in these numbers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the geographic distribution of companies. This is a US-led industry. Very clearly, at this point, the fusion industry is a phenomenon of the United States. It is something that was started here. Most of the private companies are based here, and most of the financing comes from here in the United States. Even within the United States, you can see certain geographic hubs. We happen to be standing in one right now. New Jersey has 4 fusion companies, and there is a good reason that these hubs develop. They tend to develop out of a certain center, often an educational center, a university or national lab. Happen to be standing in and near one of those. So there is, I'd also say there's a good hub around Wisconsin, around Madison. Seattle is really developing into a fusion hub. In fact, Seattle has kind of self-organized around there's a Seattle Fusion Week that will hit its 5th year this year. And so there's a lot of political momentum around that sort of stuff too. I think there's real value in finding this sort of hub and running off of the economic agglomeration effects of this. Happy to go into more detail on this. And then, of course, California. If California was an independent country, not only would it be the 4th largest economy in the world, it would be the 2nd largest fusion economy in the world, with 10, and I think we've seen another one come up there. These are big companies as well. They're not just startups. So California clearly has a important and leading place. I would also like to highlight the hub in the UK, in Oxfordshire, around the UK AEA. It's very clear that they have self-organized. There are some significant companies that have spun out of that, and there is a lot of clear supply chain interest and development in that area. And actually, we saw just this week that the Germans are leaning into this idea of a fusion hubs economy, and that they're going to establish one in Hesse, establish one in Bavaria, and another in a yet-to-be-determined place. But they're really leaning into this idea that the economic agglomeration effects are real, that you build a sort of lighthouse project in a central point, and then the economy grows up around it, and you see that sort of flywheel effect that gets it moving. This is well known and well understood in kind of the Silicon Valley area, but even go back further, think about Detroit Motor City in the early 1900s, and or even Manchester, England in the 1800s, and the cotton and textile economy. These things, there's a reason that companies like to work together and be in the same region. You can see fusion industry dates back to even the 1980s, 1990s, but you can see the drips and drabs, and you shouldn't expect that any of these raised significant amounts of money until the mid-2000s, and then you almost see this Cambrian explosion happen, 2018, 2019, 2021, multiple different companies, multiple different technologies, all starting up, all getting active, all moving forward. And sometimes I'm asked, and I probably might get asked today, do you expect to see continued growth? And honestly, I expect to see consolidation. A mature industry doesn't have 40, 50-something companies in it, but we do continue to see more come up, more sprout up. And that's the nature of a market-based economy. A market-based is that you go forward, these companies, say, I'm going to take a shot at this, I'm going to raise some money, see if it works, see if we can get a milestone. If we get a milestone, we go back, we raise more money, and kind of cycle on from there. Technological diversity. This is challenging sometimes for me, because I get questions about, well, what's a fusion power plant going to look like? Well, what type of fusion power plant? They're all going to be extremely different. And so generally, about half of them are in the magnetically confined region. 11 ICF approaches. These are laser companies, predominantly. And then you get into the other sort of approaches. Magneto-inertial is kind of that mid-range geometry between, you know, the high density and the high temperatures. So all sorts of different ways. But then this gets even more complex when you get into the specific approaches. As you'd expect, multiple companies doing multiple things. If you want to go into detail, I know it's quite small, get the report on our website. We ask our companies, what are your target markets? And as you'd expect, electricity generation is the largest, has always been. But what's been interesting about doing this over 5 years is that we've seen all of the other alternatives, alternative primary and alternative secondary, expand outward. You know, electricity is the thing that gets you into the trillion-dollar market. The electricity production is how you become a massive company. But it's also the most competitive market. It's also the one where you have to be producing a commodity. You have to be competing with established players already. So when there's other markets that could perhaps give you higher prices, companies are starting to look at that as well. So that includes off-grid applications, industrial heat. It is interesting to see medical, space propulsion, marine propulsion pop up, and then even isotope production, you know, even supplying things to other fusion companies, producing tritium. Here's the question we always get asked, and this was the reason why we created this report, because we always get asked two questions: how much and when? You all get this question all the time too. So the answer is, when do you expect to see fusion energy on the grid? The answer is, based off of the survey, these are the companies who are doing it. They're biased. Of course they're biased. But this is what they expect to do. This is where they expect to see. It is, I think the exact number is 89% expect to see it before 2040, with the majority of them expecting to see it before 2035. So last I checked, here we are, 2026. That is 9 years away. So hold us to it. Keep me on it. Keep me honest. And of course, there are 3 companies who expect to see it in this decade. This is real. This is where fusion is going. We also ask, when do you expect it to see commercially viable? As you'd expect, that moves to the right a little bit. But certainly you expect to see electricity production by pilot plants in the early part of the 2030s, with the next generation coming after to be the commercially viable ones that will make money. It is extremely ambitious. There's a lot of work to be done. There's not enough money right now to do all of that work. But we do have, the companies consider that they have line of sight on how to get that money, get those resources to then do this. How do you make scientific breakthroughs? Over time, and by applying resources according to a strategic plan. You continue to do that, you drive down risk, you get more resources, you get going. It is hard, fusion is hard, and I'm going to show you that on the next slide. But you kind of put this all together, and this is on a back of a napkin approach. This is the industry's timeline. We've had 60 plus years of research such that right now, we are transitioning to the industrialization. Multiple companies building their scientific proof of concept machine. Right now, multiple companies that will show that fusion can work in a commercially viable way. Of course, we've seen that fusion can work. The National Ignition Facility proved that in 2022 for the first time ever, to have controlled fusion energy production. Now companies have to prove that in a commercially viable way, such that then they can transition into designing and building their pilot plants by the end of this decade. That means that they're selecting sites before that. That means in the next few years, companies are selecting sites and moving forward with that. Early 2030s then is when you start to operate the first pilot plants, have first sales, and then that makes the 2030s the decade of commercial fusion. Scale up, rapid deployment, headlines everywhere, everybody makes money, everybody's happy. Will it be that simple? We'll see. I do think one of the things to note along each stage here is that each stage also has off-ramps. There are times companies won't all make it through every stage. And so as companies off-ramp, they'll start to look for what are the alternatives, what are the ways to make money, or what's the shutdown opportunities. I actually think that the fact that we have a Fusion Industry Association enables the companies to coordinate, to talk with each other, and so that when things do happen, when companies do go under, as we expect they will, it will pretty quickly be able to redistribute at least the human resources. The people who've worked in these companies will be able to get jobs, get hired out fairly soon. Now, fusion's hard. I want to underline that. Fusion is hard. We ask, what are the main challenges right now to getting fusion energy in this decade? What are the main challenges? As you'd expect, science, getting the fusion power's efficiency. What that means, plasma physics, science, getting your machine to be able to be high enough Q for fusion power. What's another challenge? Funding. Funding is always going to be a challenge for any new company. Tritium, neutron resilient materials, plasma science, and on and on. But basically, you'll hear this same story. First you have to do the science, and then materials challenges, fuel cycle challenges. These are real challenges. They are not solved problems. The challenge also is that every company is trying to solve them in different ways. So there is real opportunities for DOE programs, government programs around the world to work together on all of this, but not every approach is going to be exactly applicable across all of those. What are the challenges after 2030? It's going to continue to be a challenge. Tritium, fuel cycle, neutron resilient materials. These kind of move from the ones people accept that they'll get to the point after 2030 of figuring out the science, of getting that up and running. But these questions of material science and fuel cycle get to the point of how do you go from making a pilot plant that can make power for seconds or minutes up to making a power plant that can be commercially viable for months, years, decades. That's not obvious. These are hard challenges. There needs to be work to be done. Government can do a lot to help support this. Building the test stands, test facilities to be involved in that. That's my job. One of my jobs is to go out and advocate for stuff like that with our friends in Congress and in governments around the world. And for the first time this year, we asked companies, how much more is needed? How much more do you expect to see, do you expect to need to build your pilot plant? Now, you do a survey and you get some funny results. It's always a normal curve. We had one company that said they only need $10 million more. I don't know if that's viable. I couldn't fund $10 million myself, but I suspect we could find somebody to do that. But you should also expect that there is a wide range of scientific viability across. And then we also had a company that said we need $13 billion more. Again, is that credible to have, if you need $13 billion more to get there, maybe go look for somebody else. But I think the median came down to a good spot, $694 million more. And so what that tells you is that, yes, a lot more money is needed to get there. This is not trivial. But it's also not a Manhattan Project level. This isn't, percentages of total GDP of the United States. This is within the range of things that can be done in public-private partnership between companies, between private investors, between the government. And so when we make our case on Capitol Hill for public-private partnerships, milestone-based public-private partnership, for instance, we make a case that this should be a single-digit billions of dollars program. That's not, again, not trivial amounts of money, but it's also not out of the realm. The advanced fission community just got $3.2 billion in the FY26 appropriations bill to refill their public-private partnership program, their ARDP program. They already had several billion dollars in that program. So Fusion is asking for similar amounts of funding to other advanced technologies to get us across the line. I think that's appropriate.
Can you be a little bit more specific? Can you go back for a second? So when you say billions more are needed, is this the total amount that they think is needed? And it's needed to get to what? To get to a pilot plant? To get to
Yes. Yeah, the question in the survey was how much more do you need to raise to build your pilot plant? Because the idea is after a pilot plant, you should be able to get commercial financing for your next stage. So, we did not specify who provides that money, whether it's, so that's why I think it's appropriate to say it's a mixture of public, private, heck, even philanthropic, whoever. I don't know. Venezuela oil money, I don't know. So there's all sorts of ways to do that. So the total then gets to $77 billion for 35 respondents. But I think this is the number to catch on. And I think if you're thinking about a national program, you probably want several different technologies, several different companies. That's what the Germans are doing right now. Is they're going to fund 2 to 3 hubs with 2.4 billion euros to get them on their pathway to pilot plants. So I think that kind of gives you a good idea of where you are. Did that answer the question? So what's the FIA do? What's our role in here? Mostly what I've talked at you so far is about the state of the industry. What do? We are the advocacy arm, the unified voice of this industry. We work, our primary targets are to build public-private partnerships with the government to enable government researchers to more closely work with the private sector companies, to more closely work on the commercialization aspects. Governments should be able to participate and work together. Sometimes this has worked, sometimes it hasn't. We'd like to set up structures and get that rolling. The second thing is we have to make sure that regulators don't harm this industry unnecessarily by putting fusion into the same bucket as our nuclear fission cousins. We've been successful, and in fact, just yesterday, the NRC had a public meeting talking about their proposed final rule that will separate fusion from nuclear fission, put fusion into the byproduct material code, 10 CFR Part 30. Have to go into that in more detail, but what it really means is that the day-to-day regulation of fusion will be done by agreement states instead of the federal government, and it means that you have a much faster pathway. It's more akin to a particle accelerator. You don't have to get a permission to construct and then a permit to operate. You just have to have one permit, a permit to operate, allows you to build and iterate throughout the process. So it's a real ability to move fast once we get over that technical hurdle. And then finally, what do? We communicate, we talk about this. I do things like this. Our staff go out and talk in the press, and increasingly we're doing more on social media. I don't think we'll do a TikTok, but we are going to do more of sort of stuff like that, getting out and go to where people are. So where are we now? I want to talk a little bit about, there's been recent growth in public-private partnerships, and then I'll talk a little bit about what to expect this year, and then I'll take some questions. So in the US, I mentioned the milestone-based fusion development program. I think it's about $90 million right now has been allocated or appropriated for it $46 million of that has been allocated by DOE to 8 companies. This is the way in which the United States has chosen to build pilot plants. The private companies are the ones that will build the pilot plants with support from the DOE. At this point, program needs to be bigger. Like I said, fusion's not cheap. Needs an order of magnitude or more in here. Infuse is a great program that allows companies to partner with national labs. Also like to see it bigger. Also like to see more coming out of it. The new Fire Collaboratives program just kicked off actually this week. Over $100 million a year of companies giving advisory role, kind of not a full public-private partnership, but playing a role in advisory on what the government programs can be doing. This PFR program hasn't yet gotten started, but we think it's important. And then this Fusion Bridge program has been proposed, but we don't know specifically how it's going to run. All of this to say is there's a lot of really good ideas coming out of DOE. And they've created a new Office of Fusion alongside of the Fusion Energy Sciences program, which is in the Office of Science. And there's a lot of really good opportunities for things to happen. There's a little bit of a need for perhaps a bit of urgency to get moving on some of this stuff. Every transition takes longer perhaps than it should. We'll see the president's budget request is due out next week, and maybe that'll start to push things forward. But all that to say is there's a lot of really important stuff happening in the national program in Fusion Energy Sciences, as well as all of the private companies that I talked about. Around the world, I mentioned Germany. Germany is moving forward quickly. I'm not going to read all of this, but moving forward quickly in a public-private partnership model. Their model is really building off of the milestone-based approach. It's quite similar to what they've done. I've talked to their government, as have, they're kind of in lockstep here. We're going to see some real movement this year out of Japan. The new Prime Minister, Takaichi, she was the former Minister for Science, so she knows fusion well and is a real champion. We expect to see some excitement coming, some new money coming there. The UK put out their Fusion Futures program and their new fusion energy strategy beginning of last week that outlines how they are going to use their STEP program, which is their government-funded pilot plant to set up a supply chain-based approach to accelerating. And then the EU, the largest single budget in the world that goes to fusion, is actually the EU's Eurofusion program. At this point, most of it goes to ITER and kind of the supply chain support around that. But we expect to see a new EU fusion strategy this year that will talk about how they're going to accelerate that program. We're involved in all of these. So what do we expect this year? They did put out a new U.S. fusion roadmap, and we'll see a new iteration of that coming soon. Germany, a lot more from Germany, a lot more from Japan. UK, we expect to see more. And then China. I haven't talked about China. I mentioned all the rest here. But China is moving quickly. I've seen estimates that they've spent over $6.5 billion just since the big announcement from the National Ignition Facility at the end of 2022. And this isn't just spending money. This is steel in the ground, building things at China speed. I'm happy to go into detail on all of this, but just so you know, this is not just a talking point that helps you get money out of Congress that China's moving. China is moving quickly, and there's a real possibility that even if maybe some of the companies beat China to the punch, they have the supply chain that enables them to scale up and American and allied companies not to go as fast. So we're going to keep watching on that and work there. I also expect to see a lot more certainty coming on fusion regulation this year. Just listing off, where we'll see it here in the U.S., Japan, IAEA is publishing more, getting more active on fusion. In fact, last week we had the Director General of the IAEA spoke at our conference in DC. The G7 will probably make some announcements on fusion regulation. So all that's good and important. And then within the companies, I expect to see, these are just headlines of companies building and selecting sites now. I expect to see a lot more of that. This year, next year, is when companies are going to be making decision on where they're going to build their next iteration, their next machine. So it's all to play for. If you want fusion involved, if you want fusion in New Jersey, it's all to play for right now to be able to make that. The supply chain is something that is always going to be a challenge. We talk about it as a chicken or an egg problem. Which comes first? The supply chain companies will say, well, we need certainty from the developers before we make the big investments to be able to scale up. And the developers will say, we need these companies to scale up because we want to be running at scale in the 2030s, and they need to make these investments now. So we're going to be doing as much as we can. We're going to host a trade show in New Mexico in June. This is going to be the first of a kind fusion trade show with a trade floor where everybody can talk and discuss these things. There's ways to help alleviate this problem, but it's hard. The workforce is also critical here. STEM workforce is something that we've talked about in this country and around the world for a long time. Fusion is downstream of that. Solving the STEM problem has not been easy. I think fusion can actually help with this because of the excitement that fusion brings, because this is the real solution set here. We have some solutions here on how to do this, leverage national laboratories as training hubs, create center for excellence in key skills, promote cross-sector talent migration. What that really means is steal people from other companies. Get those people who are working at semiconductor companies to come work in fusion. Get those people who are working in new space companies to come work in fusion. It's an attractive place. Come do it. Then what do we expect? These are my questions for you. What do we expect? I don't actually know. These are question marks. Are we going to see consolidation? Are we going to see commercialization? I think so. Or are we going to see a failure to launch? I don't think that's likely, but it's certainly possible. We need to see supply chain growth. Are we going to see a world of global competition or a world of cooperation in fusion? Fusion has been something dating back to the Cold War where international scientists came together and worked together. Are we going to see that, or are we going to see more competition and increasingly fierce competition? Open question. We're going to see growth or challenges. We're going to see public acceptance. Are we going to build something and nobody wants it? I hope not. That's part of our job at the FIA is to make sure that people know that this is something they should want. We're going to see demand growth for fusion, or are we going to see demand destruction from the global policy angles? I don't know. So this is who we are. This is all of our 44 member companies right now. It's getting a little tight on the slide to fit everybody. And this one's really tight. This is all our affiliate members from all around the world. As you can see, these are the supply chain companies here. These are the end users, the utilities, the buyers, that sort of stuff. And these are our member supporters there. So that's me. Maybe I'll put this question up, this to seed some thoughts and questions and stuff. We've got some time here. I'm happy to take questions. I think there's some mics in the back. I hope I've given you all some stuff to think about. Feel free to throw your hand up, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let me ask the first question.
Sure.
Let me ask the first question.
Sure.
So there's been a paradigm shift, right? We had the one unit of eater, everyone working together to do something. And now we have the commercial approach. Why do you think this is better?
Yeah,
No,
eater,
you know,
yeah, eater,
that's
the
your
way,
existence,
right?
right?
Yeah, I mean, it is my thesis. It is, I think fundamentally a market-based approach is the way to get there. Competition in a market, so competition between companies, not competition between countries necessarily, but competition between companies is the thing that drives market-based economies forward. So I firmly believe that's the thing that's going to push forward. The other thing it creates in a market-based approach is shots on goal, right? And I'm not qualified enough to tell you which shots are going to hit. But certainly of those, 44 member companies, I like the idea that it's 44 different shots on goal in multiple different technologies. Some are bound to hit, right? And some are going to be taken from closer to the net, some from further back to continue to torture the metaphor. So I think by putting, now to mix metaphors, putting all your eggs in one basket with Eater is a way to fundamentally put you on a pathway that when something goes wrong, as something did, it puts, it just, creates a longer time horizon. ITER was kind of the same model of global cooperation as like the International Space Station and other major international science programs, which makes sense for international science. But fundamentally, when you're building something commercial, something of value, there has to be a point at which there's a handoff from science to the market. And I think that handoff maybe happened at a different place than many of the global fusion people expected it to happen. The plan was always ITER and then demo would be built by government programs as well, and then a handoff would happen. But that's actually not how science is commercialized.
Thank you. So, any questions? Students go first. The younger, the better. Okay.
And if you could just say your name, so I know.
Hi, yeah, so my name is Nicholas. I'm a PhD student in the chemical engineering department.
Great.
Thank you for the talk. One of the things that I was hoping you could speak on is how fusion compares to other methods for clean energy production, so higher kind of technology readiness levels for nuclear power and geothermal
Yeah.
exist, and yet we haven't seen them kind of penetrate the energy market.
Yeah.
What makes fusion different
Yeah.
than these technologies?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I did back in my prior life at a think tank. I did kind of an analysis of the American energy system that looked at it as like the trilemma, right? So it was energy security, energy access and cost, and environmental sustainability. So how do you manage all of these? And so across, there's trade-offs in any energy system on any of these. So if you care only about energy security, you go all in on coal. If you care only about environmentalism, you go all in on renewables. But then you get drawback on all of the others. So if you look across at these other emerging clean energy technologies, they all have, they're the solution here as well. And so we look at our competitors to fusion as being the clean, firm energy sources. So that means nuclear, especially advanced nuclear. It means geothermal. It means hydrogen. It means carbon capture sequestration, those sorts. Now, when I look at all of those, they all have, they'll mostly meet, the challenges on that trilemma, but they all have some sort of drawback. Nuclear, it's their regulatory history. Can they move fast enough in a strictly regulated way? And also, can they deploy globally? Can you really deploy advanced nuclear with, the special nuclear material everywhere in the world? No, you've got to go under strict international security controls. So that'll help. That'll stop them from deploying as fast as we need to deploy. Geothermal, I actually think geothermal is really exciting. Some of the stuff that's happening there, and there's a real chance that that could be something that is just everything. But the thing that I think about, and my friends at ARPA-E have told me, it's like the energy demand of the future is just so much, and the need for clean energy of any sort is so much. There's room for all of it. So I think what you're going to see is all of them coming on board, and then it's almost like, this may be before your all time, the old Highlander movie, and then there will be one. They all work together, and then they all fight each other at the end. So I can see there being clean, firm energy as being the next wave, and then once a bunch is on the grid, then I think fusion ultimately will win. But obviously, I'm biased. All the science fiction books you read, it's all a fusion-powered economy. There's a reason.
Hi, I'm Jalal. I'm a PhD student working on nuclear fusion. Super cool talk. Thank you for the broad survey level insight. I'm curious about what you think the level of fickleness of venture capital's appetite for something like something that comes with the growing pains that come with something as elusive as unlimited energy that comes with fusion, especially in particular to failure for a particular large scale fusion company.
I think it was kind of what's been interesting when I first got into fusion. The common knowledge was that fusion's too hard for venture capital, or fusion's too expensive for venture capital. That proved not to be true. They jumped in with the significant amounts of money, $10.5 billion so far, more to come. And the venture capitalists have really educated themselves a lot here, so that there is a cadre of kind of the fusion investors who know what's happening, know what's good, know what the right milestones are able to actually do the work here. I do think that, especially with the largest companies, we are butting up against the limits. There's only so far that venture capital can go. And so I think it's relatively easy to raise a Series A of $20 to $40 million. It's harder to raise a Series B of hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a big hurdle to get over. And then it's really hard to raise a couple $1 billion. And so you got to make a very, very clear and compelling case. And I think what's going to need to happen is new pools of capital have to come in, whether they're from Wall Street type, capital, or whether it's, IPO time. We've had 2 companies go into the public markets in the last couple of months, TAE and General Fusion. They're not fully done with the mergers, the SPAC acquisitions, that sort of stuff, but pretty soon that will be done. So that's a new space for us. So I think we're butting up against it. What's interesting is different countries have different ways of doing the financing. In the United States, the capital is in these sort of private venture capital places. But if you go to Japan, the capital's in the big corporates, and they kind of play a role of venture capital. And so they're Sumitomo and Mitsubishi and these sorts of things are investing both in Japanese companies and into American companies. So there's different ways of skinning the cat.
Hi, my name is Sonia. Thank you for your talk. I was curious about policy support. So I know for nuclear fission, we've seen relatively bipartisan support, which is a little bit unique compared to solar, wind, other clean energy technologies. So I was wondering, for fusion, do you expect to see, or have you already seen, bipartisan support, or do you expect to be divided along party lines, and how do you sort of prevent party line divides?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important that fusion is bipartisan, has been bipartisan and stays bipartisan. I've made this a part of my advocacy, a part of FIA's role here, is to not take one side very clearly or another. And that's hard in today's Washington. It is not a bipartisan time right now. And actually, I think nuclear has had bipartisan success, but right now is riding a partisan wave. It's the Republican governance that is really pushing nuclear forward, the advanced nuclear companies. And so we'll see if that draws blowback, but they're using what they can right now to get as much on as they can. There is a Fusion Energy Caucus in the House, co-chaired by Don Beyer, Democrat of Virginia, and Chuck Fleischmann, Republican of Tennessee, alongside Lori Trahan of Massachusetts, Democrat, and Jay Obernolte of California, Republican. So they're in, I think we've got 120 members of the caucus right now. A good mix of Republicans and Democrats. Fusion is seen as it's fusion energy is the best sort of renewables for Democrats, and nuclear fusion is the most advanced form of nuclear energy for Republicans. So right now, I think we've got good bipartisan support. The challenge really on policy is budgets. It's just numbers. We're pretty confident that we could get things passed in Congress that we need, that anything that doesn't require money. But getting money means that somebody else's budget has to go down, or it has to come from somewhere. So that's the real challenge right now is, actually on policy, the nuclear folks, what they needed wasn't money. They needed regulatory and policy acceleration. So and they got money too.
Andrew has been nice to have a very short talk so that we can have a long discussion.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that
feel
was the
free
point.
to ask whatever.
Keep going.
It's much shorter presentation than normal. So we have lots of time.
See one there, yeah.
Or you can just leave. If you want.
Yes, a couple questions. Like you mentioned, interesting, that's my point too, is bipartisan support.
Yeah.
And it just struck me. I said, gee, that map that you showed of where these centers were,
Yeah.
the fusion centers, Washington State, Wisconsin,
Yeah.
California, East Coast.
Yeah.
They don't strike me as centers of Republican
It's a challenge.
interest that
Yeah.
would support these future centers. And whether maybe one thing to do would be, okay, let's put one in Texas again.
I wish I had that sort of power.
All this Tennessee.
There is in Tennessee, Oak Ridge area. There's one in eastern Tennessee, and
Yeah,
actually
Eastern
in Mr.
Tennessee.
Fleischman's.
Okay, so we got Eastern Tennessee.
Yeah.
The other point is you mentioned about even private funding of some. I mean, you hear about these hundreds of billions being spent by the likes of Amazon or
Yeah,
Walmart or whatever
yeah.
for this huge AI investment.
Yep.
And companies like NVIDIA or
Yep.
Oracle giving money to some of these companies
Yep.
to help them in their
Yep.
development efforts. So whether this is, I mean, considering the energy requirements for all these things going on, is that another future source of money for?
In fact, a current source of money. Google is an investor in multiple companies, and Google is one of the, has signed a contract to be a power purchase of 200 megawatts from Commonwealth Fusion from their first power plant. Microsoft has signed a power purchase agreement with Helion Energy to buy 50 megawatts of power from them. So yes, this is happening. There's more. NVIDIA and Commonwealth they've agreed a deal to build digital twins. NVIDIA is doing this with several other of the kind of fusion facilities around the world. So there is real opportunities there. We are leaning into this hard. I think that AI and data center boom, that changed the game in terms of energy demand. 2-3 years ago, fusion, the idea was, well, we'll build the first one in the United States, but the United States market is too competitive. Electricity was too cheap to be a place where you could really deploy a lot. So the companies would build the first here, and then it would deploy in Singapore or other, in Japan, island countries in Asia with high demand and high energy prices. The United States is now a place with high demand and high energy prices. So that's changed, And we're going to see that continue to change even more as I think there's been a real push for, if you're going to build a data center, you also have to build the equivalent amount of power as well. So, you know, there's policy push behind that. Yeah, it's exciting.
I think Emily had a question. Oh no, sorry. And
There's one there.
I should make it up, Dr. Bunley.
Yeah.
And he has shown that the first Q greater than 1 was achieved in JET in the core. So we beat,
cool.
Tokamaks beat the ICF. We just didn't do the analysis. Oh, sorry. Well, I always. Sorry.
Yeah, whoever. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Juan Andres Garcia. Full disclosure, I work with one of the affiliate members of FIA,
Yeah.
American Fujikura. We're one of the key manufacturers of high temperature superconductors, critical for magnetic confinement devices. And I just want to brief shout out to Andrew. Last week we were in Washington. He had conveyed 500 people to really discuss the latest on supply chain policy and commercialization. So for any students in the room, postdocs, make sure to get involved. At the very least, sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah.
And for Professor Coleman and for Andrew, and for the students in the room, perhaps, I wonder if you could share a little bit, you know, the joke as we were discussing over lunch, you know, fusion is always 10, 20 years away. Why is the convergence of AI, fusion, and high compute so critical now that makes us believe that it's going to happen soon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that demand drive is pulling it forward, and I mean, Egeman, you're better placed to tell us all how AI is pushing us forward, but certainly, you know, that there really is using AI and compute power to means that companies are and scientists are confident that this will work. The next machine you build will work. You're able to make those simulations and models instead of just being, you know, we put it together based purely on theory. You know, there's pretty good consistency here between the models and that, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, now I have a comment.
Okay.
So I think no one will dispute that the fact that AI has come on like a lion it has created the market demand that is necessary, right? Just having market demand doesn't mean you have a technology that can meet that demand, right? So while, yes, we know not just from the NIF experiment, but from TFTR here that you can make fusion work, right, in the 1990s, it is, you know, we're a long way. Even if, let's say, you know, I fully believe that we will be able to get to Q equals 1 is not, I don't think that's a problem, right? Q equals 10, which is what you need for a burning plasma to be sustained, yet to be proved, which is what ITER is doing. And I don't think anybody in the room will dispute that ITER, we should all be frustrated with how long ITER has taken. But the fact is that we need to understand that, and we not only need to understand that, but we also don't have a clear mechanism for how to build a reactor whose walls will not fall apart within a very short period of time because of neutron damage.
Yeah.
So, you know, I just think we all have to take a breath here and recognize that we should not oversell where we are. And to say that in 3 years or 2 years in some cases, that there's going to be a pilot plant, maybe the pilot plant, fine, you could build a pilot plant, you might even be able to get to Q equals 1, you may even be able to get higher, but it will not be a sustained, it cannot be sustained in terms of operation. I speak as a material scientist.
So
okay?
I can't control what the companies say. All I can control is what the survey says, right? And so the survey says that the majority of the companies expect to see this in the 2030s.
Yeah, that's already a better hedge than they were saying before. So I think that's good. They're already pushing,
and I can
pushing
only
back their
control what I
timelines.
say, right?
Right. No, that's right. But I just think it is important to say it's not what, you know, what, Eggy, what you do, you know, you're going to help with the plasma physics, right? You're absolutely, right? You may help also with the liquid metals, right? For sure. And so, but there are, this is as you said, it's really hard, right?
Yeah.
It's incredibly hard. And because it is so hard, we owe it to the American taxpayer and to whoever the investors are to be as transparent and honest about all of those difficulties.
Yeah,
And
100%.
because otherwise, we all would love to snap our fingers and have fusion tomorrow, right? I'm right there with you. But we need to make sure that we are really clear with people about all of the challenges and how that has to move ahead. And of course, it's great to have all these companies, but the companies should not overpromise.
Yeah, yeah. You know what else was hard was internal combustion engine, when that started, human-powered flight. You know, all of these things were hard and are hard. Advanced nuclear companies are hard. Deep geothermal drilling is hard. Turns out even just offshore oil platforms are hard. And so, yes, it's hard, and you know, I think yes, it's worth it. So we have to do it.
Every single one of those examples, you were never firing the kinds of high energy neutrons into materials that need to be, we need to figure out how to have materials that can withstand.
But they all had
those.
their specific thing that at the time were the hardest thing possible. The New York Times in 1903 said that human-powered flight is still 1,000 years away. So, you know, you put it in context of the time, and these things are hard. You apply and you iterate, and you apply again, and you continue progress. That's, you know, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's you know, will the first fusion power plants be the best ones? No, they'll be the worst ones ever made.
For all power plants, that's true. That's right.
You know, and they'll get better. So.
Okay, so let's see if there's any questions. Yeah, there's one in the back.
Hi, my name's Liam Deming. I'm a venture capitalist, so I'm specifically interested in compact fusion reactors and whether that's something that's even going to be remotely feasible within the next 5 to 7 years. So specifically, the example I'm thinking of is where Lockheed Martin attempted to make one based on the FRC reactor, and that program failed pretty spectacularly. Do you feel there's been really any considerable improvements or changes in that regard since that program failed?
I mean, we don't know that Lockheed Martin failed spectacularly because they didn't publish. And it sure would be nice for the ones who fail to publish why it failed so that we all can learn from it. And Lockheed Martin's not a member. I asked them to join. I asked them to be involved. It sure would be nice to do that. Or was it just a corporate decision that we don't care about fusion? We want to care about our, you know, ongoing, you know, military and national security mission. So we don't know. It's hard to say it failed. Or did they just reallocate capital? Compact fusion is harder. Everybody in the scientific community will agree with that the easiest way to do fusion is to build it as big as you possibly can. And that's why ITER is so big. That's why DEMO is projected to be bigger. The problem is that puts you into a commercial cul-de-sac where, you know, there's more steel in ITER than in the Eiffel Tower. So, you know, that much makes it commercially unviable. So that's why the companies have argued and pushed for more compact companies. Now, I'm not a scientist. I don't claim to be one. You know, I'm not the one to say to do your deep diligence. Avalanche here is doing compact fusion, one of our member companies. They have a contract with the DIUX, the Defense Department, investment arm to do some work on compact fusion. It's hard. The nice thing about compact anything is because it's small, you can build it faster, you can iterate, you can learn, you can take it apart, build it faster, iterate, you know, that sort of stuff. So there's different varieties of different types here. I think Avalanche is probably our smallest one, but DoD did a compact fusion workshop last summer, or I guess DOW now, did a compact fusion workshop last summer that looked at what it would mean and what sort of technologies were available if you could have it be mobile, if you could have it be, at a forward operating base or at some sort of, it's really interesting and really exciting if you could do that. Science is harder though. So I don't have anything, really hard for you. I can also tell you that we have a number of companies that apply and then, for our application, you have to prove you're doing fusion and not cold fusion. And you'd be surprised how many cold fusion companies are out there. There is a lot of not credible approaches. And so, we have a pretty good way of filtering them out. It's not pure peer review, but it is definitely, the companies say, that ain't gonna work. So
Andrew,
Yeah.
on the timescales,
Yeah.
so TAE has been around for 30 years.
1997 they were
Yeah,
founded.
well, something like
Yeah.
that. 29, okay,
Yeah.
not 30.
Yeah.
And I think Helion, like, 10
Helion
plus
was
years.
2013, yeah.
Yeah, so 13 years.
General Fusion,
Yeah.
2002.
So
Yeah.
the question is, when do these companies become real companies, not startups?
Right.
Like, when do you classify them as and is there, you
Yeah.
understand the question
Yeah, and
here?
when-
I mean, or when do you, like, if it's a startup, if it doesn't work, you shut it down, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's not what's happening around here. So what is the
It's
resolution
can you-
there? I
can
know
you
you can't
continue
talk
to-
about your members too much, but you
No, it's
understand.
like,
the
can you
general
continue to show progress, though? And then, yeah. So TRL is a tough thing because it's within the whole fusion system itself. There's different parts at different TRL levels, and so you could say, well, everybody's basically a TRL3. But you kind of look within the fusion system, it's TRL6 for the plasma physics, it's TRL3 for the fuel cycle and the materials and stuff like that. So it's not for me, it's not for the association to determine at what level, it's for their investors to determine at what level. And so when do you move to a startup? Maybe it's when you go public. And so General Fusion and TAE are now going public, and so they're going to have to be responsive to public markets and the SEC and all of that. Is it when you hit 1,000 workers? Commonwealth has over 1,000 people working there. I don't know. Is SpaceX still a startup? I don't know. It's venture capital backed. It's not gone public. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Last question.
Last question.
Hello, Andrew. Mike Hornsby with New Jersey Board of Public Utilities.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, what would your ask of state governments be?
It's a great question, and a good one to end on. What I'd ask of state governments is that you treat fusion the same way you would treat any other large-scale business, either a manufacturing facility or other sort of energy facilities, anything that could be a jobs and technology center. You will compete with other states for that. So providing the structures, the incentive bases for what makes your state attractive. Now, some of that's going to be tax credits, some of that's going to be siting, some of that is going to be support with workforce issues. And every location is going to have different different levels on each of those. I can tell you what we've seen. The reason we're having our supply chain conference in New Mexico is the state of New Mexico has decided that it wants a fusion energy economy and is putting money that they have from their sovereign wealth fund that comes from the oil and gas drilling in New Mexico. They're putting that into attracting companies there. And they're giving very, very attractive concessionary terms. At the same time, New Mexico is a small, not a small geographic, but small population state. So workforce is always going to be a challenge there, even though they have a good workforce from Sandia and Los Alamos. So it's, there's pluses and minuses, costs and benefits. I mean, I was out in California in November, and they were talking about, well, we can't lose another company to somewhere, to New Mexico. We can't, so this is a competition. Same if you were trying to attract a, auto manufacturing plant or, something else, I think treat it in that same sort of, don't put us in, the one thing to definitely do is don't put us into the nuclear ghetto. Don't put us into, you have to go onto a nuclear site or a nuclear plant, because fusion does not need that. Fusion can stand on its own and treat us independently from how you treat nuclear energy.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Good.
It has to be safe, just like everything else. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. We really appreciate